Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here today to talk to you about Daybreak, the Netflix show that came out in 2019. So this show is a post-apocalyptic comedy drama. And like I said before, it only lasted for one entire season, but it was created by that of Brad Payton, who's a Canadian man, and Aaron Ellie Coletti, an American man, and is based off of the comic by that of Brian Ralph. He created a graphic novel back in the day, and the show is very, very, very loosely based off of his graphic novel. I watched this show when it first came back out in 2019, and I was looking for something very different and very new because The Walking Dead at this point was just getting on my nerves. Because The Walking Dead has stopped being good for a long time, so I was looking for tons of alternatives. I found Zombo, I found Van Helsing, and then I found Daybreak. And when I watched Daybreak, I didn't know nothing, and I mean nothing about this show, what it was based off of, anything. And in fact, for this video, I've actually started trying to look for information on the comic, which is really hard because it doesn't have a Wikipedia page or a fandom wiki page. And there's very little information I could find on the internet. And I was really shocked and surprised to find out just how much they changed in this show. And I think that's one of the reasons why it probably only lasted a season, because most of the hardcore fans were really pissed off at all the changes they made. Plus, this was during a time when Hollywood was going woke Hollywood and everything. So there's tons of diversities, sexualities, there's messaging, and there's and I kid you not, pretty much in every episode, one of the diverse characters is always complaining about either men or the white man, something like that. And for the most part, as a person who loves woke Hollywood, loves diversity, and is tired of seeing shows being predominantly white with only one person of color, I was happy for all the diversities and all the races, because when you look at the world or the country you live on, the country I live in and stuff, it's extremely diverse. Plus, they're in Greendale, California. And from what I've heard, California is very, very diverse and everything with multiple races. So when I look back at all these shows from the 90s and stuff, and shows that are from California, like Sliders, what was that one show I used to watch on NBC Saturday morning? Malibu something. It was one of those. It was kind of like Saved by the Bell, and also Saved by the Bell, and California Dreams, and shows like that. There was another show. Oh, Beverly Hills 90210. Oh, so when I watched those shows in the 90s, and the entire cast is white, and the background characters are white, and they just so happen to have maybe at the most one black person on the show, or a black and a Latino person on the show, and if they're really lucky, one Asian person on the show. That really confused me back in the day because I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess that's what California looks like. Tons of white people and barely any like diverse people. But then I was reading a comment on like Beverly Hills 90210, the intros, because man, last night, right before I went to bed, I was just living it up. Like, I'm like, I remember this show. And I remember the intro and the music. And somebody commented talking about, like, where are all the other races at? This is California. Like, there are multiple races here and stuff. And I would never have guessed that looking at 90s television and stuff. So I appreciate the diversity in the show. The messaging, on the other hand, I'm okay with only if they can do it in a way that flows naturally in the show when people are talking. Sadly, however, this is not the case. It was around this time when Hollywood was trying to be like, okay, we know we messed up in the past, we gotta fix this, and blah 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 blah. Everybody's hating on men and for good reason and stuff. And so it's like, let's point out certain things. And it's cool to point out things because you have to educate yourself. You don't want to be stupid and everything. But the way in which these people talk, and then all of a sudden they just sprout out this like microaggression thing towards like whatever. It just never came out naturally and everything. And this is what started to irritate some people that are normal in the head. But then of course for those angry people on the head, like on YouTube and on social media, they was just annoyed, talking about why you making us feel guilty and everything and blah blah blah. And so they never had like writers that could just make it come out naturally. And it's not just one show or movie that would do this. It's multiple shows on different networks. It's just like these writers just had no idea how to write messaging without coming off as like, pandering or preaching and everything. And it's the same way with diversity sometimes. It's like every time there's like a person of color, or better yet, a diverse person, a woman, a person of a different sexuality, a person of color, they just didn't know how to write these characters because once again, the majority of these shows were created and written by that of like white people. And so they just never could grasp how to portray that properly and everything. So of course, what did they do? The check mark system. And so they made sure they checked everything off a list that was going around this era of time in Hollywood. And when you check it off a list, like, it doesn't matter. You can be genuine and sometimes you can't, but it's kind of like if you don't have a grasp of what it is you're trying to like talk about and you're not familiar with it because you don't hang out with these certain groups and stuff like that, you're gonna have a hard time. But for the most part, like I said before, it didn't bother me watching this show. But as I'm watching it now or rewatching it in 2025, I can point out a lot of those messaging thing that might sound a little bit irritating and stuff at times because it just comes out of complete like nowhere. Kind of like an MCU joke. Like everybody's being all serious and stuff, and then all of a sudden somebody just pops out a joke or a quip or something like that, and then they go back to being serious. It's just like the most awkward thing like ever and stuff. Now a lot of people hated this show, but I loved it and everything. Like, this show was hilarious. It was one of the funniest shows I watched around this time. In fact, like, this is kind of like a zombie-ish apocalyptic show. And I was gonna save it for Halloween, but I decided not to, only because I realized something. There are like barely any zombies in this zombie-esque type show and everything. So it's mostly just a post-apocalyptic show that's a comedy show as well. But man, when I say it's hilarious, it is hilarious, especially the way people break the fourth wall in this show. It's very much like Deadpool and everything, but it breaks the fourth wall completely differently than the way Deadpool does. Like, I've never seen nobody, and I mean nobody, when they're doing a flashback, they're literally running to the location and when the flashback like takes place and everything. That's just like freaking hilarious. Like it's just like most people just like flashback, they just like cut to that scene, but no, the dude's legit just running back to where like the flashback took place and stuff. And I love that. It's different, it's fresh, and it was so great to have a comedy like this during a time in 2019 when we was going through a pandemic. But we were going through the COVID pandemic. And so knowing that this show deals with a bioweapon viral outbreak and everything, they probably didn't want to watch something like that as they're kind of living it, in the real life. So I can see why that irritated a lot of people. But as for again one season, I just don't understand that. Like it should have had multiple seasons. Like I don't get why people didn't like this show. It had a bunch of like characters that are like different and you can kind of relate to. The jokes are always on point in like the weirdest, wackiest kind of way. Now there wasn't much zombie and stuff, and that's what irritated me. Like, and it also wasn't much action because there wasn't much zombies. It was mostly just people fighting on people, but then you rarely saw that. Now, I will say the show can get a bit confusing and contradictory and everything. Like, they will state something and then completely contradict it either in the next episode or like within the same episode and everything. They couldn't stay consistent. Like, here's the thing, the show is like, in my opinion, like just like really good, but it also has some flaws and everything. Another flaw other than contradicting certain things is like there are really no good characters in this show. Everybody is scummy in some kind of way or fashion. They all have flaws, which is good to have a show where your characters have flaws, but your characters kind of have to learn from those flaws and mistakes. And sadly, no character here truly gets redeemed because they don't learn from their mistakes. They're just kind of redeemed because they happen to do a nice thing, but they never learn their lessons, especially that of the protagonist and everything. Now, before I get into him, there is actually one character and one character only that is good. That's like a main character and not a background person or nothing, or recurring, and that is Miss Crumble. Miss Crumble is actually the only nice person in this show who's never really done anything bad in her previous life before the apocalypse. And even during the apocalypse, when she does bad stuff, it's only because she's like half zombie and everything. But she prevents herself from doing bad things. And they didn't really explore her character that much. Now, the main protagonist in this is Josh, a Canadian person who moved to like America. He's in high school, and he is the most, well, he's not the most flawed at all. They're all flawed, but he's one of the most and everything. And he's an odd protagonist. Well, first of all, let me just say, I've been wondering for years, like, this dude is the only Canadian in the show and no other character is. And I'm all just like, that's kind of weird. Like, how come he's Canadian? Is there like a reason? There was no backstory behind it. He's just Canadian. And so I looked it up online. The actor is American. The person who created the graphic novel is American. One of the co-creators is American. But Brad Payton, he's Canadian, so he wanted to be represented. I can respect that. But back to that of Josh. He's so flawed in everything. He's only driven by one thing in the apocalypse, and that is finding Sam Dean, his girlfriend and love interest of the show. Like, that's the only motivation this dude has. He's living in his parents' house, which they are now gone, thanks to the apocalypse. He has tons of food and, like, he can survive, but he decides to leave all that for a quest of finding his one true love. And the dude literally just doesn't care about nobody and nobody else. Even when a little girl is held captive by a group of like teenage boys, he doesn't even really care to like save her and everything. He just kind of leaves her there after he finds out who she is and how she got freed and everything. And it's just kind of like the dude is so selfish. And so it's kind of like, how are we supposed to root for this guy? And he is our main character. Not only that, but we find out he does something scummy and towards the end of like, the series. And then it's kind of like the dude, it's a zombie apocalypse type show. And he has like a nemesis. Well, he has two. But he doesn't fight really none of them. And he carries a sword, but who the heck is he fighting? He doesn't even know how to use it. And so he just wants to look cool with it. And so when it does come to the big battle and all the students are fighting one another, he's not even fighting his main protagonist one of his main protagonists in the show. Instead, his girlfriend is like fighting the main villain. And she doesn't really, she has a reason to fight him like everybody else does. But it's like, shouldn't Josh be the main person to fight like this dude and everything? And not only that, but when did his girlfriend learn how to fight like this? Like, she's going, well, not full Xena, but half Xena on her. And I'm just like, there's never been no display that she could do any of this stuff. Now, I'm okay with the characters when they're fighting, they're just like whacking each other with like weapons because nobody really knows how to fight. And you think she should be able to do that too, but nah, she's just holding her own against like this grown man who's technically invincible and everything. But then they finally allow Josh to get the kill below on like the main villain and everything. I'm all like, but he didn't fight the guy, not even once. And it was just kind of odd. And so not only do you have a flawed protagonist, but he doesn't even get to fight the main bad guy and everything. And Josh is only the main protagonist because of that, of the graphic novel. And because like when the show first starts in the first two episodes, it's all about Josh. He's the one breaking the fourth wall. He's telling his origin story. But then by the third episode, it starts to go to the other characters. They're able to break the fourth wall, and then we get their backstories, and the entire episode focuses on them and like currently what's going on with them in the present day or like their backstory. Now, this is completely fine because every character needs to have some type of like, character development or what happened before the apocalypse and stuff, because you got to get to know your characters. You need a reason to like them and everything, right? But it's confusing to the audience because it's kind of like, wait, hold up. Like, say you don't know nothing about the graphic novel, right? As you're watching this show, and the show starts off with that of Josh, and the first two episodes focuses entirely on him and him breaking the fourth wall and everything, then you assume, okay, he is the main character and everything of the show. And the other cast members who are main are more like supporting characters. Characters that are supposed to support the main character of the show, which means they really don't have no screen time by themselves unless he's there. If you learn something about them, he has to be there for them to tell him that and everything. So when the show started to branch off and have all of these solo episodes and stuff, then it no longer is about Josh and him being the main character protagonist. Then it's just an ensemble cast and everything. So it was a little bit confusing because it's kind of like, okay, what type of show am I watching? A group show about a bunch of people, or this one main dude who just happens to know a bunch of people and stuff? But I do like the backstories in which they gave everybody, except for one person. One character did not get a main backstory or like a solo episode, which is weird because they could have gave her that, like, cause in the 9th episode at least, but they decided not to because in one of the episodes, Josh and Sam have like their solo episode again. Josh gets like a third one, but like Sam gets hers finally. And it's the worst episode ever. I swear to God that I think like that's what it is. The 8th episode is by far the only episode I do not like. Like, there's only probably about 4 or 5 that I love. The rest are just okay and entertaining. But episode 8, my God. The Sam episode is just horrible and stuff. Because it makes both Sam and Josh seem like horrible people. Now, there's a huge twist that comes in that episode with both of these characters. But they kept just like getting down. They just kept like disintegrating like the likability and everything. It's like their likability just started going like downhill, and it's just kind of like, why would you do this? These are two characters that you have forced us to like. Like, we see like Josh all throughout the series, and he's a pretty cool guy, flawed but cool and everything. And then they just ruin him in the 8th episode. Then Sam, because she's missing all throughout the entire series, and we only find her towards the last maybe 3 episodes and stuff, like, they forced us to like Sam. She's supposed to be the extremely likable girl and everything. Like, because this show also deals with like stereotypes and everything. Well, I'll get into it a little bit later. But she's supposed to be kind of like, the typical white girl trope in television. She's pretty, she's likable, everybody just loves her and everything and wants to gravitate towards her. But then in her solo episode, they made her into a very horrible person. And then in the last episode, there was a huge twist that I did not see coming. And it's kind of like what we actually now know about her, like the real Sam from episode 8, as opposed to what the creators wanted us to believe through the perspective of Josh. It's kind of like, I don't see her doing that. Like, I really don't. Now, back to kind of like the messaging and everything and the characters and the tropes. Like, when it comes to the messaging, when it gets to the very end, it's kind of like, well, hold up. Like I told you before, Sam in the fighting. How in the heck is she able to do that? Like, that don't make no sense because we've never seen her display anything like that. And then it's kind of like Angelica. I get it. She's smart and she knows how to make like synthetic drugs and everything. But then it's kind of like they have her disarming a nuke. And I'm just like, since when does that 10-year-old girl that we've seen all throughout this series knows how to do that? She doesn't even know what to do when she's on her monthly and everything. But yet she knows how to like supposedly disable a nuke and learn all the codes. And I'm just like, what the word? What the what? And the teacher helps her out. And I'm just like, that don't make no sense. So it's clearly they're checking things off the list to the whole doing like the whole woke Hollywood era of the strong woman type and the strong smart woman type. And I'm just kind of like, that's great. Like if you ever watched my channel before, you know I'm all for that. Like women empowerment. There's a reason why I dedicate March for like, you know, I talk about nothing but like a lot of female content because like I love like really strong, smart women and everything. And plus it's Women's History Month. And so, but then it's just kind of like, but when it comes out of the blue and it makes me scratch my head, I just don't like that. but, but this show also does the complete opposite of what woke Hollywood was. There are also like a bunch of tropes, like I said before, like, and tropes are very stereotypical, and like it's the reason why woke Hollywood existed, because you don't like none of these stereotypes. But this show also has like racist humor. They even make an ICE joke, and the person making the ICE joke is an Armenian, and when you find out that his mom came from another country and she struggled, but she made sure he had his magic cards as a kid because that's what made him happy, even though she didn't have the money to buy those things, but she did whatever she could to like get him those cards. It's insane that the character, who's now a teenager, makes an ICE joke. I'm just kind of like, what? And cause you know we was going through that period in time with the government and everything where ICE was cracking down on like, you know, immigrants and stuff, and they're really doing it way worse than what they did it before. And it's just weird to see this type of joke in this show when the show you assume is being progressive. It's progressive on one hand, but it's toxic on the other and everything. You have the trope of like the annoying kid, the likable white girl, the likable white guy, the evil white man. Then you have like the evil like man of color. And then you have like the black best friend. And because they need a gay character, what modern Hollywood is doing right now is that when they need a black character and they need a gay character, they combine those two. And you also have the loudmouth black girl in this, and she's also angry and everything. And it's just like a bunch of toxic stuff left and right in this show. And it's shocking because you think it's progressive, but then it just gets like toxic after a while. So they wanted to have like that balance, you know what I'm saying? So the show deals with the aftermath of an explosion. A bunch of bombs went off. Probably, I don't think they were nukes or nothing like that, but a bunch of bombs went off. And when they went off, the radiation killed all of like the adults, and the ones that survived turned into zombies, which they call ghoulies and everything. But they're technically not your traditional zombie. They don't eat brains. When they bite you, you don't turn. And but like they're ghoulies in the sense that they gave them this kind of recurring gag of like the last thing they said before their brain went to like mush and everything. They just repeat that over and over and over. And it's odd and it's interesting, but it's kind of like, does it serve a point? It doesn't, because you barely get to see the zombies in the show. And not only that, but they contradict this. Like you'll see some zombies who repeat the same thing over and over and over. And then you'll see other ones that don't and just like snarl and growl like a typical zombie. You see some ones that are like very slow paced, but then other ones are very fast and aggressive and fight and know how to use weapons and fight. So it's not consistent at all with what you're told in like the first episode. Also, not only that, more confusing stuff. You don't really know what caused this outbreak virus and everything. First, we're told a bunch of bombs went off. Then we're told it's bioweapons and everything. And so it's like, is it not? Don't know, because they don't really explain that. Then we find out that some teenagers actually died during the explosion because all the other teenagers and kids are still alive. But then we find out at the very end, a couple of them died. And it's kind of like, how exactly? And this is also something that like contradicts itself. It's because the principal at the high school made all his students get vaccinated, but the ones that didn't get vaccinated died in the explosion. So somehow the radiation was blocked by this like vaccination they had. But then that don't explain Angelica, who's the only kid in the show, because she goes to like another school. So was she immunized and everything with the same like vaccination that the teenagers got? Like, I don't know. Was it something that was like mandated to all the schools? Then that would explain how and everything. But then you have to stop and ask yourself, where are the rest of the kids at? Angelica is literally the only kid in like the show. So where are the rest of the kids and everything? And then there might be like a little bit more of like a little bit more confusion, because the principal literally says that like he uses lead paint for the walls in the school. And so if Angelica, since she was in the high school, they're trying to say that the lead paint blocked the radiation and everything and prevented, some of the kids dying and stuff like that. So that would explain, but then it's kind of like, so I guess the explosion killed the majority of the people in the city, but it turned all the adults that are still alive into like zombies and stuff. But so like no other school used lead paint, or no other kid was like, I don't know. Like it's a little bit confusing. Then we find out, but wait, hold up. If it's just this city, what about the rest of the world? Why aren't they doing anything? And so then you kind of get this odd explanation of like these kids who are gamers who decide they're just gonna play video games during like, the apocalypse and everything. But they're playing with kids from like all around, like in other states and I guess other countries and stuff. And so then one day Josh, he starts to ask, like, how far did this spread? Is it everywhere? Is it just the city? Blah, 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 blah. We never get an answer to that because the show runners probably don't know, or they were banking on the second season. And that's the problem. Don't bank on a second season. Try to explain as much as you can in like the first. That's what The Walking Dead kind of did in the first season when they went to the CDC. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, there are kids in other places and possibly adults maybe. Why didn't they send help into Greendale and everything? But maybe it did spread. But then was this like bio warfare or what? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not really explained. And there had to be other adults that were like in bunkers or like, lead paint or something, but where are they at? Then there is the principal. He's not a zombie. Now, he was in a bunker when all of this went down, and why exactly was he in a bunker? It makes you wonder if he caused this or not, because there's so much inconsistency with his character growth and development. But then it's kind of like when he came out the bunker, all of a sudden he became a cannibal instead of searching for real food, because apparently there's still food around and everything. And because, Josh has a bunch of food and there's food in the mall, and, the other characters have to eat stuff. But for whatever reason, he just becomes a cannibal, and all of a sudden, he's immortal. Like, he's super strong as well. But it's kind of like, how is he invincible? Nothing kills him. And like, how did he become super strong, like a monster and everything? And that's never explained, because no matter how much research I've done on this show and the little explanation that the show gives, he's not a zombie and everything. Now, Miss Crumble is like a half zombie, but he's not. And also, something that has to do with brain damage and how she was able to be a half zombie and stuff like that. And I think he has brain damage or something. And so it's kind of like they was banking on that second season to explain a little bit more. But they didn't do a very good job of that. Now, when it comes to the comic and the person who wrote it, like I said before, I can find very little information on it, but the information I found is very fascinating. Apparently, everybody keeps saying it's a very indie comic, because it is an indie comic book, but they say it's very, very indie. Now, I don't know what that means, but apparently, apparently from what I've read, the main character of like the comic is like a little boy who's missing his arm. And apparently you never see his face. Everything is shown through his perspective and everything. So the Josh character in the show is made up, but it's loosely based off of him. There's even a scene where Josh is trying to cut off his hand because he got bit and thought he was turning into a zombie. But he hit some of his wrist, but then he missed and just chopped his finger off in there. Or he didn't miss, but then he chops his finger off and stuff. Or maybe he did miss, I don't know. And so this is supposed to be a reference to that kid in like the book. But like I said before, Josh is completely made up. But not only that, but all the characters in the show are completely made up. And so it is very, very, very loosely based on like the comic. The creator of the comic actually showed up in the 5th episode as a zombie. And he said, it was weird being on set and knowing that, this show is completely different from his comic and everything. But he was a producer, I believe, on the show. And not only that, but it's like I've looked for pictures of the comics. And I'm like, if this is supposed to be through the point of view of like the reader and this little boy, then all of a sudden, why are there pictures of the little boy and you can see his face and everything? So I'm not really too sure about that. Then as I was looking for more pictures of like the comic, I started to come across these. And I don't know what the heck this is from, because it's still Daybreak, but now the characters kind of resemble the ones from the show. I don't know if this is fan art. I don't know if this is like based on a new comic, like the previous name or anything like that. Like, I honestly just don't know. And everything. Like, I'm just so confused and stuff. And I wish there was just more information on this comic. Now, there are lots of differences in, like, I'm saying, like, when it comes to that, the show and the comic and everything, there are some things that actually do stay the same, like the zombie thing, right? Now, in the graphic novel, the zombies are more like they lurk in the night, they hunt, and they chase after the main protagonist a lot. In the show, however, they're just barely there. Like, you probably see them in the first 2 episodes, rarely, like 1 or 2, and then like you won't see another one again until like the 5th episode, but then you won't see like another until like the 9th, and especially that of the 10th, when they're all around. But they're mostly just there for comedic relief and not scary in any kind of way. In this show, you don't see them really looking for food. Food just kind of happens to be there. Like, you see tons of it in Josh's place when they're at the mall. Like, I think there's like a vending machine or something like that, and they're trying to get like the main bad guy to eat well, one of the main bad guys to eat and stuff like that. But you don't really see them just like looking for food. But then in the comic, that's a recurring thing where he's constantly looking for food. And his main thing he likes to eat are potato chips and stuff, apparently. And from what I read, he found like a can of cream corn and threw it away because he'd rather have like potato chips. Now, the whole flare gun thing, like in the comic, the dude uses it to scare away animals and like zombies and stuff like that. And like in the show, they try to utilize the flare gun too. Like whenever they're doing something, like because the show is split up into groups, like social groups at school and everything, because it's a teen drama. And so in these social groups and stuff, like they'll have like a flare gun, they'll fire it off for whatever event they're doing. And then in the last episode, like one of the main bad guys and his love interest are having like a duel with pistols, and it turns out to be flare guns. And I thought that was a weird thing. I'm like, why is he using a flare gun? Because his love interest thought it was real pistols and everything. And I'm like, this is just the dumbest thing ever. But now I know it's like a reference to like the comic. But why use it in that manner is beyond me. In the comic, the kid will use any kind of sharp weapon he can get his hands on, especially that of a machete. But in the show, Josh, he finds a samurai sword and he uses his skateboard as a shield. When I first thought this was like extremely based on the comic, I assumed, okay, yeah, that's something a kid would do. Use a skateboard as like a shield. But no, in the comic, he doesn't. So the kid in the comic has a dog that follows him around. Josh does not have a dog. In the show, however, we see like squirrels looking normal, but then we see a bird with two heads. And then we see a giant dog in like one episode that's trying to like attack one character and ends up sexually assaulting like a character and everything. And because a male dog will hump anything and mate with any girl dog he sees. And so sadly, for whatever twisted toxic humor, they thought it would be funny to have like a dog assault like a teenage boy. So I'm going to get into character bios really fast. And so like in the show, like I said before, because it's a high school drama setting, they broke off into different like social groups, which is really interesting and I think very fascinating. Seriously, this show should have just called itself something differently, since it's pretty much different from the comic. Because this would have been like a really unique and interesting thing. You have like the jocks and you have the daybreakers. The daybreakers are like the group of kids that Josh ends up saving, and they live in the mall. But you don't really know who these daybreakers are. That's the problem. Like, oh, what's the girl's name? Like Karen. And it's like, that's it. She's the only one who really has any dialogue and who actually ever does anything. So, but they made it like really important to give themselves a name, because they're mostly, it doesn't make no sense. It's kind of like, why did they give themselves like a group name just because the other students did that? Like, that don't make no sense. So she's all like, no, we're daybreakers. And it's like, oh, okay, the show is called Daybreak, so it must be something important. It must be an important group. But the group is never important. So they're showing emphasis to this group for no apparent reason. Then there are the I'm getting tongue-tied. The cheer-azons. It's like Amazons, but cheerleaders, so cheer Amazons or something like that. And they're interesting. They're like, they decide, okay, look, the world has come to an end. They're no longer going to take men's crap. So they're going to be like a group full of women who are strong and independent. And if any man comes near them, they'll kill them and stuff. And then you have like, I forget his name. One of the main bad guys. Crap. Forget his name. Turbo, that's it. You have like his group and everything. They're more like Mad Max kind of people and stuff like that. And so, yeah, it's a bunch of wacky characters and like, this pisses me off. This show ended because I really like these characters in the show. All right, so character bios. Jessica, played by, and I'm not sure how to say her name, Estorella Villa. So she is one of the daybreakers who got rescued from that of, I think it was it Turbo or Baron Triumph? I can't remember which one, but she got rescued and she's living in the mall with the rest of the teens. And she barely has anything to say, and she barely has anything to do. She's mostly a background character. The only reason why I'm mentioning her is because of the simple fact the actress was really the only person campaigning for a second season. Once the show got canceled, that was pretty much it, and everybody, like, I guess kind of like gave up or went on their like own separate way. But like, she was like aggressively campaigning like on social media for people to watch the show so they can get renewed, hopefully for a second season. But as we know, it did not happen. Now, I've only ever seen her in something else where she had a minor role in, and I think she was in another show just recently as a recurring character. Mavis. Mavis is a bizarre character who randomly just pops up like in the middle of like the series. It's when Josh finally finds out that Sam is alive and he's kind of acting like his stupid typical jerkish self, and then all of a sudden somebody, I think, like leaves him a message and he goes to like the roof or something like that. And then there's this random girl who just happens to be there. I'm not even sure if she went to like his high school and everything. And she's a graffiti artist and everything. And she spray painted something on a wall and gives some words of like encouragement and stuff like that. Now, what's interesting about this character, like, she's so off-putting, she's just so random, who just appears out of like nowhere, and she's only in that one episode and that one episode only. But I recognize the actress. She's from that Fox X-Men television show that came out a few years back, called The Gifted. But she's more than just that. She's played by Natalie Allen Lid. And what's so interesting about that is that her sister, Olivia, is one of the main characters on this show who plays Angelica. So I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. So like, her sister just came in for like a guest appearance role and stuff like that. That was neat. Plus, it was nice to see her again because The Gifted had like, got canceled. The jocks. So the jocks mostly comprise of like golf players and stuff. And they're in the first episode and they're like so annoying, so preppish that they get on your nerves. They act more like that fraternity from Scream Queens and everything. And so the main leader of like, their group, Terry and everything, he doesn't like Josh and they exchange some words, but they also kidnap Angelica for some bizarre reason. And they put her in a cage of all things. And so like Josh, he thinks that it could be Sam, but it's not. And when he finds out it's Angelica, he really doesn't care. And next thing you know, he gets into like a scuffle with the main dude and he tries to chop like the dude's hand off, but just takes his finger off and everything. Eventually, all the jocks end up dying except for Barry. He is the last one. he's kind of just there in the show and just spouts off kind of like deadpan humor type stuff. But then when they need the principal to be the principal again and stop going around like eating kids and everything, he offers himself up to be the meal of the principal. I'm just like, why is he sacrificing himself? Like one of the few black characters in this show, and he's just sacrificing himself to be eaten. But then in that episode, he's not eaten until the next episode when the principal decides to chop some of his body parts, his limbs off, and use it as a smoothie and locks him in a closet. And I'm just he's just totally okay with that. And I'm just kind of like, this don't make no sense whatsoever. It's like the show wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to play both sides. It wants to be devil's advocate. It wants to be progressive on one hand and then completely stereotypical and toxic on the other hand. Mona Lisa. There's not much to say about this character, even though she appears in nearly every episode. She's Turbo's like second in command. And like the only thing we know about her is that she's short, black, loud, because you know she's black. So stereotypical. And she refuses to date a white guy because she says she doesn't like white meat. I'm just kind of like, what? What in the world? And it's just kind of like, but yeah, so she's one of the bad people on the show who's with Turbo. But then when he gets taken down and like, you know, she's with the other kids for whatever stupid reason, her and Sam decides they need the principal to, you know, reinstill order and everything. And he refuses to somebody, no, I think it's Turbo who can't eat or refuses. And so she gets the help of like Josh and Miss like Crumble and all this other weird crap. But yeah, she's one of the people who put the principal back in charge. And that turned out to be the biggest mistake ever. You know, Mona Lisa's interesting because it's like she won't date a white guy, but she's willing to serve like 3 evil white people. Like, I don't get that. Like, you know, Sam, the principal, and then Turbo. The Cheer Mazans. So they're just a recurring group that like appears, they don't really do too much. They just hate men and refuse to be dominated by men again. So they're a society of like Amazons who are former cheerleaders. And there are 3 leaders, Demi, Victoria, and Miriam. And so like there's also a character there that's like deaf. And there's a bunch of exchange students and stuff like that. And yeah, Veronica, she's like the interpreter. But the thing is like they refuse to allow any men to like join their group, or boys I should say, since all the men are dead. And they want Angelica because they say, you know, she's smart and independent and that's what they like. And so after the second explosion went off, the majority of them were like injured or like died. And the ones that like survived later on joined Josh and the rest of the Daybreakers and taking on the football players and the principal. But for the most part, they really don't have that big of like a role. Karen, who also goes by KJ, she's played by Clarissa Zhang. And she is like, I remember her from Titans. She played Rose and everything. But yeah, so she starts off as an exchange student who doesn't speak English. And she is like a slave along with other slave exchange students, foreign exchange students at that, who don't speak English, to that of Baron Triumph, the principal. And so the reason why he has enslaved them to do his manual labor is because he said foreign exchange students who do not speak English are the best slaves because they're unable to communicate with themselves, and so they're most likely not to try to like escape because they're unable to mount an escape because they don't speak English. That don't make no sense for the most part, because they can still, like, even though they don't know what they're saying, they can still do hand gestures and, like, oh, if you pick up an object and club somebody, that means, okay, to hit them in the head or something like that. But in some ways, his logic is kind of sound because they can't communicate with one another. But, we've learned in the past, just because you don't know what nobody is saying, don't mean you can't figure something out. You know what I'm saying? Especially when you point to an object, say the name in your own language, and then they're like, oh, okay, that's what that means and stuff like that. But then it turns out she actually can speak English, and she speaks multiple languages. She just does that, like, so I guess, I forget the reason why she doesn't speak English. I think it's so people underestimate her and probably don't bother her and stuff like that. But she ends up becoming a love interest of Josh, and ends up sleeping with him. Eventually, he did not want her because he still wanted Sam and pined over her. But Angelica wanted him to get with KJ and everything. And so, like, eventually he does. Only when he finds out Sam is alive, and after sleeping with KJ, he dumps her for Sam. And she's really irritated by that. It is then she forms the Daybreakers. Josh can't even form the Daybreakers, and the show is named after the comic and all based off that character in the I swear to God, man, like, I'm cool with them giving women like things to do in like shows, but you gotta let your main protagonist do something. You know what I'm saying? And so she comes up with the Daybreakers and this and that because she used to hang out with like the gamers and stuff like that. And so she's very annoyed with Josh and refuses like to talk to him and stuff like that. But those two made a cool couple because they both like skateboards and they both get along and everything. But he screwed that up. And so at some point she was trying to forgive him until he acted like an idiot again. And then when he brought Sam back, Sam realized there was something going on between those two because KJ started taking charge after Sam started taking charge. And so they're both kind of like, going back and forth in like, the position of power. And Sam realizes Josh must have slept with her and everything. Eli Kardashian, spelt with a C, not a K. He is Armenian and the dude is hilarious. He is one of my all-time favorite characters. It just sucks he's a huge jerk. But the dude is hilarious in this show. And he's really the only main recurring character to like die. Yeah, Barry doesn't really die. He just kind of, he just goes in the closet. We don't know what happens to him. But he's the only main, like, recurring character that's a kid that dies in the show. Well, teenage kid at that. And it sucks because, like, he was so hilarious. So if they would have got a season 2, he would have been dead and everything. And so the thing about Eli is that he's an extreme jerk. Every time he sees somebody, he greets them as turds. Now, he's extremely selfish and everything. When the apocalypse happened and 6 months later, he found the mall. And he decided he's going to keep the mall all for himself. And it doesn't make no sense because there are so many store departments and supplies that he can help, like, people in the city, the other teenagers, but he just wants to keep it all for himself because he is extremely selfish. And when Josh and like his two friends come in, he's pissed and don't want them there. And he even goes as far as to blackmail one of them because the thing about him is that he spies on people. See, to navigate, all the different groups are kind of in conflict with one another and don't like to be bothered with another. And also they are zombies. So to avoid all this, he dresses up as Baron Triumph and rides around on a motorcycle similar to that of Triumph. to kind of trick people into leaving him alone. When he does that, he goes for like supplies and he spies on people. He has like a hidden camera on like a remote control like car, like toy car and everything, where he spies on folks. And then he uses that as blackmail, as he did with Wesley Fisk. And so he's not a good character whatsoever, but he is extremely hilarious. And then when Josh starts bringing more people into the mall, he's pissed and just don't want them there. And eventually he gets kicked out of his own mall because Josh finds out the dirty-handed stuff he's doing. But he always finds a way to sneak back in. And the thing is like the reason why he's probably so selfish and everything, one, he's an only child, and two, when he has something he likes, he cherishes it, and he wants it all for himself because it really means a lot, like his magic cards. In his solo episode, we find out that his mom's an immigrant and she struggled, but no matter what, she got him these magic cards, which was the only thing he liked. And so his magic cards are very special to him, and he keeps them all to himself and doesn't want nobody to touch them. Kind of the same thing with like the mall. But eventually he does help Josh, like try to break into like where the principal is hiding out at and stuff like that, only to get killed. When he was dressed as like Baron Triumph, another student who Baron was once trying to eat and cook on like a spit and everything, who Josh saved, thought that was the real Baron and stabbed him over and over in the side. And there Eli like died. And it sucked too, because even though he was a jerk, and I mean a major jerk, he was so hilarious. He's always talking about like, you know, the clothes he's wearing and like the jewelry, talking about I'm Gucci and everything and stuff. But then he also made that like weird ice joke and everything, which was just kind of like just off-putting after you know what happened with his mom and stuff. Turbo, who's known as the bro jock. So he is like a former quarterback for the football team, and he is the leader of the jocks and everything. Even though, like, see, here's the thing about the jocks. They're comprised of different groups. And like the golfers, the football players, and like a couple of other like groups that he formed into his own, into like this Mad Max society type thing. He is the overall leader, but there are other smaller leaders in the group, like the dude from like the golf team and stuff. He is a peculiar character, one who I do not like. One, because he is the villain and one of the main villains of the show. Before the apocalypse, he was just a jerk, your typical jock who would pick on anybody. But one of the people he always picked on was that of Josh. Now, during the apocalypse, his best friend was like Wesley, who turned out to be his secret lover and everything. But when the apocalypse happened and the explosion happened, his face, half of it got singed off, and he suffered severe like throat damage and everything, to where he can barely speak. So he's pretty much mute all throughout like the series and everything. And it's pretty funny how he tries to communicate, because he just grunts and there are like subtitles and everything. And so like, but like I said before, he's in a secret relationship with Wesley, to the point where he wants Wesley to assassinate that of Josh. And like a stereotypical jock, he doesn't like it when Wesley hangs out with other people and associate with them. And he really hates it when he hangs around that of Josh. And so he gets really jealous whenever like somebody hangs out with him. It's even to the point when Wesley saved his life, and like literally saved his life. And he even asked him, you know, like, are you going to hang out back with your friends, and starts naming like some of them, and just gets so jealous to the point where he wants to duel that of Wesley for some bizarre reason, and he has these old-fashioned pistols that turned out to be like, theater props and shoot out confetti. And so he's just your arrogant, like extremely like bossy, extremely like micromanage, like, aggressor and everything. Even to the point where Josh keeps beating him and everything, so he needs a win. So he staged his own assassination, and as his people is trying to figure out who's trying to kill their leader, one of them determines that it was him all along. And the reason why he did it is because he just wants to up Josh in something, because he's tired of losing. And he's willing to sacrifice his own people just to make himself feel better for some bizarre reason. Because, like a stereotypical jock, he's not very bright and he can barely read. And now, on top of that, he has daddy issues for some reason. And he pretends that his father, Joe Manganera and everything. I'm just like, I think they're trying a little too hard to make this like dude the ultra villain. And for the most part, he is the ultimate villain of the series until like the new one comes up. And is even to the point that he's willing to kill a bunch of like the people who used to like stay with him and everything that now live in the mall with like Josh and everything. He's just a really screwed up character. And at the very, very end, they try to redeem him, but he does nothing to be redeemed. It's just all of a sudden he decides to join Wesley and Josh and everybody on taking on like, Baron Triumph, only because Baron Triumph like pretty much stabbed him to where he was gonna die until Wesley helped him and stuff. And it's like, why should we feel sorry for this character? Why should he be redeemed? Yeah, he's funny and everything, but he doesn't do nothing to win over people's sympathy because he's never done anything good to be redeemed and everything. Mrs. Crumble, played by Krista Rodriguez. And so she's a lot of people's favorite character. And she's Josh's favorite teacher. Like, there's one scene where he's in the mall and what's his name? Turbo's looking to beat him up and he hides underneath some clothes. And so Miss Crumble finds him under there and just lies to Turbo. And then she goes down there with Josh and they just have a nice little conversation. Sometimes it seems like those two like each other, but not really, you know what I'm saying? But she's the only good character in the entirety of the show who doesn't do anything wrong. But she has a very bizarre backstory. So when we find her and everything, she's a ghoulie. But I think, what's his name? She's living inside Eli's mall. And so when Josh and them find her and everything, he's upset because that's his favorite teacher. But she's so strange and bizarre, and she's able to talk, like form actual sentences, which no ghoulie is able to do. So she's like a hybrid and everything. But it's not really explained how she turned into a hybrid. And since the show got canceled, they really can't explain it. Now, when we first see her, she has short hair. When we see her again, she has really long hair and now has black teeth. She's the only ghoulie to be able to grow their hair out and everything. That's something I've noticed, because with all the other ones, their hair is just regular like length and everything. And it could be because she's a hybrid or because this show is so inconsistent. And now all of a sudden she's wearing like all black and she's doing this goth thing, which wasn't her before. Angelica thinks she's some kind of witch, but she doesn't have no magical powers, even though she thinks she can turn her body into mist. Now that she's half ghoulie and everything, it's weird. Like when we hear the other ghoulies talk, they talk in their normal voices, but for her, her voice has completely changed. If you've ever watched Mad TV about 30 years ago, then you remember an actress named Nicole Sullivan on that show. Miss Crumble kind of looks like her in her ghoulie state and does that weird voice that she typically does when she's on Mad TV. And so, like, it turns out that she doesn't want to eat kids. So instead, she just like eats metal for like the metallic or copper taste and everything. And so it shows that she has a conscience still and has a heart to where she just can't force herself to want to eat nobody. And so it makes you think, hey, maybe she's not a ghoulie. Maybe she's just crazy in the head. But no, when they're looking for something, I think they're looking for keys. And so she ate them and everything. And she's able to rear her head back, open her mouth extremely wide to the point that where her jaw should be able to break. And she's able to reach down into like her throat and pull out whatever it is she ate. Which it happened to be one of her tiny doll heads that she ate and everything that she typically talks to. So when her keys or whatever it is Josh is looking for is way, way further down, he sticks his hand all the way down her throat and, pulls out whatever it is he has to pull out. And it's just so odd and bizarre. And she has these maggots which she eats and stuff like that. And she also uses them to heal up people's wounds. I guess that's a thing. I don't know. I've never looked into that. I know some people use leeches and everything, but I never saw them use maggots to heal like a wound when a person's like bleeding out and everything. But it's just kind of like she's this really complex character. And she loves Angelica a lot. To where those two end up becoming best friends. And like when Angelica left, she went to go follow her with the Amazon group. But then when Baron Triumph found them all, he tried to convince her to eat Angelica, and that's what she tries to do until she doesn't want to do that no more. Now, one strange thing at the very end, like I said before, is like when they're dealing with the nuke, Angelica needs her help. How? Miss Crumble ain't that freaking smart. Yeah, she's a science teacher, and yeah, she's smart. But to know how to, like, deal with like a nuke and everything, and it explodes with her next to it, and she's completely okay, not singed or nothing. And when Angelica asks her, like, what are you? She just smiles and giggles. She has no idea and everything. And I think even if they were to get a season 2, they went a little too far with her character. Like, I like the idea she's a hybrid and everything, but they need to explain how she's able to do stuff and like how she's able to survive a nuclear explosion. Now, her backstory is a little weird. I told you about the whole singing thing and everything, and she's a science teacher teaching, like, Sam how sunflowers are like vital to a person's survival and everything. They give you food and they can absorb radiation. Now, them absorbing radiation, I have no idea if that's true, but this does remind me of a comic and an animated movie, The Dark Knight Returns, I believe it is, where it's an older Batman and an older Superman and they fight. And then at one point, Superman gets hit with a nuke. And then he's in a field of sunflowers and they absorb the radiation from the nuke that hit him. And I remember seeing that in the cartoon movie, and I'm just like, I don't get it. So maybe that is a thing. But like, then it happens with the principal. He tries to do something to her. He's trying to like assault her. I'm not sure sexually, but at least physically. And she ends up falling down some steps because she found out he was taking bribes. And when she hit her head, she had brain damage and everything. Then the bomb went off and all the adults turned to ghoulies. So somehow they're trying to connect her brain damage from going full zombie and everything, which don't make no sense. There's also this weird thing about her name. Her name isn't even Crumble. Apparently, her name is something else, but she won't tell nobody. And when she first started teaching, she started crying, so they made fun of her and gave her the name Crumble, as she's crumbling. And so all the students started calling her that, even the teachers and stuff, and the faculty and the staff. And so, next thing you know, the school wrote her checks out as Miss Crumble. So she couldn't cash them, so she just legally changed her name to Crumble, which is the stupidest thing ever. After rewatching this series and everything, I now have a theory as to why Miss Crumble is a hybrid. So in the Sam episode, she starts talking about sunflowers and like how you can eat them and how they absorb radiation and stuff. And Sam starts to like sunflowers after that. But in one episode, I think it was the second, when Josh was hiding from the bullies and everything, Miss Crumble, went underneath like the clothes with him in the mall, and out her bag came sunflower seeds because she likes to eat them. And so I'm thinking to myself, as weird as this show is, what if the sunflower seeds absorb the radiation, from like the blast and everything, which could have caused her to be like a hybrid or something. It's a weird theory. It's a weird show. Michael Francis Xavier Burr, better known as Baron Triumph. He is the principal, and he is played by legendary actor Matthew Broderick, who is, of course, Ferris Bueller and the voice of Simba. And to date, this is probably one of his best roles since like Ferris Bueller, because of how quirky it is and everything, and how you think he's just this nerdy principal dude, but is really like a mass murderer eating kids, and which is probably not the best thing for him to play. Mainly because of an accident that happened in 1987. He was driving with Jennifer Grey, and then all of a sudden he went in the wrong lane and crashed into a car, killing a 28-year-old woman and her mother. And like, he claims that he had no idea what happened, and he just woke up in the hospital. Jennifer Grey needed surgery so she wouldn't have paralysis. Jennifer Grey would play his sister in Ferris Bueller. She was also on Dancing with the Stars. And like, he was supposed to go to jail for at least 5 years, but you know how those celebrities are. They get away with stuff, and he had to pay a fine of like $1,000 or something like that. And yeah, not the best thing for him to play a murderous like principal. And yeah. And so like, but yeah. So he's the weird principal with like a nut allergy, and because of that, he won't allow any nuts whatsoever to be in his school. And he even told Josh that he has a nut allergy and that certain other students have it. And that's how Josh was able to kill that of like the golf jock with his sword, because he laced it with like peanut oil and everything. And so when he just like cut him a little bit, that was enough to kill the dude. And or at least like, mess him up really bad. So anyway, because of this, he won't let like no nuts whatsoever in the school, and he makes all his kids get vaccinated, which is how they survive the explosion and stuff from the radiation. And so for the longest time, he doesn't even appear on screen, and we have no idea who this Baron Triumph person is, because he wears like this kind of like leathery jacket, like a helmet looking thing, a mask, and he kind of looks like one of those people from World War II. And so like, but for whatever reason, Baron Triumph is capturing kids and eating them like a cannibal and stuff, until he sees Josh and he has his helmet off, because he captured this one student, put him on like a roasting pick, and like started like, about to cook him. And it turns out to be the principal dude. And it's just kind of like, why? Why is he bearing triumph? Like, why is he eating students? And how did he not turn into like a zombie? So, long story short, it's because he was in the bunker at the school. But the thing is, it doesn't explain how he's super strong and how, like, he can't die. Like, you stab him, he won't die. And it doesn't make no sense. And so, like, also doesn't explain how he can fight really well towards like the end of the series, because he doesn't display none of that. Now, he did attack Miss Crumble and threw her down the steps, and she hit her head, and it had the brain damage and everything. But we don't find that out too much later on, after his reveal of like Baron Triumph. And like I said before, he has all the foreign exchange students pretty much working slave labor and stuff like that. But yes, he eats kids. He's our second primary villain and takes over for Turbo when Turbo is defeated. Plus, he thought he killed Turbo, but didn't. But it's never explained why he's evil, though, In that Turbo, like, flashback and everything, yeah, Turbo was like, he wanted to like, the principal wanted to like expel Turbo, but I already went into all of that and everything. And then he started like taking bribes from like parents and stuff like that. But it doesn't explain why he's this evil and everything. And it's just so strange and bizarre. But once he is defeated, he's then locked in a cage, just like all his slaves and everything. Until Sam and the other girl I told you about, because Turbo wouldn't eat or something like that, they needed his help. Oh, and by the way, he also helped Angelica when she was going through her monthly, telling her what to do and how to use, the pads and everything. Or that little thing they shove up them, I forget what it's called. But yeah, like, he's just an odd character. He reminds me of Mr. Rogers, Mr. Fred Rogers, but evil. And he talks like him a little bit and stuff. This slow demeanor and weird quirkiness to him, and he's just so bizarre. And it's Matthew's greatest role since Ferris Bueller. But then everything takes a weird turn. He does get the school and the students back in order, just like they wanted and everything, where he wants discipline, but he wants everything to be super micromanaged. And even though he turned the students around, so now they're no longer acting like rebels and everything, he still wants to eat them and everything. He tricks them into thinking he's finding a cure for like this zombie crap and makes them eat it, and then they pass out just so he can eat them and everything. And he can have them blown up because somehow he found a nuke and he wants to set it off. Why? Because, well, actually, to tell you the truth, two things happened. First, he found a regular bomb, which he had one of his students like set off. But why didn't he do it since he's immortal? Then somehow he found the nuke and wants to do some kind of bio warfare type thing. It's never really explained why he wants to set it off. Like, maybe he wants to, like, set the world anew where he's the leader or something. I don't get it. But then in the very end, he has this huge fight with like Sam, and then Josh stabs him through the chest, which people thought, they knew he wasn't dead, but he was like faking it. But Josh, Mr. Lacer that he is, he laced his sword with like peanut oil and everything, killing what's his name finally for good. He's an odd character. Like, it's weird. It's like other characters are more defined. Him, Miss Crumble, and like Turbo, it's just the writers didn't really know what to do with them. So they just kept making up all kind of weird stuff and hoping something would stick. Now, one thing that was never explained is what the heck was that creature that was like crawling around the principal's like inside his body. Because at one point in time, a giant hand just ripped out of his stomach. And it's just kind of like, what the heck is going on? I thought he wasn't a ghoulie. So, like, what the heck is inside his belly and stuff? Like, this show, I swear, man, it's like, as the show kept going, like, further and further, it started making less and less sense. And they just started coming up with the most, like, bizarre type stuff. Wesley Fisk. Now, that is the most ninja name a character can have. And he's played by Austin Crute. And so, like, his character is a Ronin samurai. And I guess the last Ronin, not the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle one. And so he's decked out in like this really cool, like, samurai type outfit. He has the hat, he has the two swords and everything. And he lives by the Ronin, like, creed or whatever. Now, his backstory is really interesting because it's narrated by RZA and everything. And it's just the coolest, like, narration I've ever heard. And I wish they had more celebrity, like, guest narrations. But this dude did an amazing job. So the thing about Wesley, the simple fact is, he grew up watching tons of martial arts, like, movies, and because of that, he learned martial arts. And it helped him cope because with him being gay and everything, it was really difficult. Like, he tells Angelica, like, you know, it's difficult not only just being black, but being gay. And when they had like a heart-to-heart conversation, which, yes, is messaging, but yes, it made people's heads spin because they said it's woke. But this is what you're supposed to learn about society. You're supposed to learn that you make black people life difficult and you make gay people life difficult. But once again, it's guilt, and y'all don't like feeling that. And so, like, his character is slightly complex, but not really. Mostly it's just he tells the story, his backstory of his uncle, and like he wanted like a strawberry soda, and his uncle called him a racial slur, not a racial slur, but a homophobic slur and everything. And it made Angelica like apologize. I'm not sure, 'cause I don't think she called him anything bad, but she's so mouthy, who knows, you know? And for the most part, he's a really, really nice guy who smokes a whole lot of weed, you know, because he's black. And the writers think, I guess that's what black folks just do, constantly smoke weed. And so, like, but like I said before, he's really nice. But when you see more of his backstory, you find out that like he's a football player. He's like, you know, in a relationship with like Turbo, and he picks on Josh back in the day. But now, because of everything that's happened, he is Ronin, but he has a dark secret, which Eli knows, and he's hiding from that of Josh. Turns out Turbo wants Wesley to assassinate Josh, and that's why he, you know, found like Josh and befriended Josh during the apocalypse. But later turned out that Josh was such a nice guy, he decided to be his friend, and he felt guilty about everything that happened. Then there's the whole story of his like cousin and like Turbo and all them like wanting him to like throw the football game and or sabotage his cousin or some crap like that. And I think his cousin died in the explosion because he was like near the explosion or something like that. So he has a lot of guilt and a lot of grief and everything. Now, as for his whole Ronin samurai thing, for the longest time, I just been waiting for him to bust out his swords and kill a bunch of zombies, or at least fight some like bad students and everything, which when Josh is in trouble, I assume he was gonna help out. But then as soon as he's about to draw his sword, he's like, no, I'm a pacifist and everything. I don't believe in violence. I'm Ronin and everything. And I'm just like, okay, maybe his character is a coward or something like that. Or maybe he just doesn't know how to fight. But then he does this training montage And yeah, he got some moves and everything. He can do flips. He can do martial arts. He's really good with a sword. And he tries to teach Josh how to do all that. But then you never see this dude fight with a sword until the very last battle with the football players. But because they sped up, like, the film, and they kept doing so many cutscenes, you see the other students fight and you don't really see him. And once it does get to him, it cuts from him really fast. I think you see him like swing his sword once because you can't really see him do anything else. So I'm not sure why they made him into this really cool character, a martial artist and everything, but you don't get to see his moves. Heck, even his name is like a play on name of Wesley Snipes, Blade and everything. And I don't know why they're gonna give him this cool name, this cool look, and swords, but he don't do nothing. But the thing is, he does betray that of like Turbo and tells Josh, like what's up and everything. So they can be ready for the ambush. And this causes problem between him and Turbo. Now, I hate how they make him into like the black best friend and how he constantly is in love with the main bad guy of the show. Even when he gets kicked out of the mall, he goes looking for like his evil boyfriend and everything. And it's just like, why are they making him like this? Like, he's such a cool character, other than the weed, and other than like, betraying people and stuff. So next to Eli, Wesley, Angelica is also one of my favorite characters. So Angelica is played by Olivia. I always had the hardest time saying her name. Olivia Allen Lid. And most people now know her from like the Chucky series as Lexi. And they might know her from the Spiderwick Chronicles that came on for like a season. But when I saw her in this show, I'm like, this little girl looks familiar. Why is that? So I'm thinking, I'm like, oh my God. She's Lily, not Lily, Lil Dolly Parton and everything. From those NBC, like I can't say her name, Dolly Parton, like movies they had on NBC back in the day. Those TV movies. I'm like, holy crap, like she's a little bit older now. And this was like 8-9 years ago, and she plays a 10-year-old character, and she was about 10 years old in this show. So she's probably like finally now like 18, 19 or something like that. It's just weird seeing her go from Dolly Parton to Angelica to Lexi. And Angelica, while she looks like this cute, adorable little girl, she has the most foul mouth, sailor's mouth, South Park mouth I've ever seen. She's constantly cussing people out. Every sentence she is cussing people out or telling them to suck her you know what, and she doesn't even have one. Apparently with her backstory, it's just crazy and everything. So she doesn't like going to school, and she sneaks into Josh's school to sell drugs. What? So okay, she says she wants to be a gangster, a lady boss and everything. She wants to be a drug pusher and everything. So she created drugs and made them out of this synthetic slime that you eat. So now it doesn't look like your typical drugs. Now it just looks kind of like mushed up jello or something like that. And that's her whole thing. She wants to make a bunch of money, be this gangster and all this other stuff. And she's supposed to be a little girl, man. Like, she literally wears like one of those animal pajamas and has like roller like wheels on her shoes and everything. But like, yeah, so she goes to Josh's school and she starts selling it until the head cheerleader girl makes fun of her. And she decides to get her back by busting the girl's nose open and making it bleed. Now, Josh cannot stand her. And when he found her in the first episode with the jocks, she was in the cage. And he's like, oh, no, not Angelica. And he just leaves her there. And she's all like, dude, why you going to leave me to these guys like Will and everything? He's all like, if you can survive an apocalypse for 6 months, you could survive them too. Now, it turns out she really likes Josh. I don't know if it's like a little girl school crush or anything, but I think mostly what it is that she doesn't want to be alone because she doesn't have her parents no more. Now, in the very first couple of episodes, they made emphasis that Angelica hopes that her parents are still alive, and if they're zombies, ghoulies, or whatever, that hopefully she can change them back by trying to find a cure. But then this whole plot is completely dropped after the first couple of episodes and everything, and especially after we get Angelica's solo episode in the third episode, because Josh has passed out from losing too much blood. And so, like I said before, she finds Miss Crumble and thinks that, hey, if she's half ghouly, maybe I can fix my parents and everything. But like I said before, that plot got dropped. But then she does end up becoming best friends with that of Mrs. Crumble, even to the point where Miss Crumble tried to eat her by losing control. Like, Angelica was really upset. This is like the closest thing she'll have to like a mother now. Now, she's really protective of Miss Crumble as well. She won't let nobody kill her or hurt her. And Miss Crumble, if it turns out that ghoulies hate loud music, because Wesley was being a DJ, about to have a party in the mall, and all of a sudden, like, it hurt Miss Crumble's ears. But this is the weirdest thing. In the last episode, they used loud music, the Walking Dead style, to lure a bunch of zombies to the bad guy's fortress. Only problem is, now all of a sudden, the zombies' ears are like okay to loud music. But like, what the heck in that one episode? That doesn't make no sense. How can that hurt Miss Crumble, but not the rest of them? It's like they're forgetting what they came up with, their own lore. Now, Angelica's big secret is that she wants Josh to stop obsessing over Sam and looking for Sam and just live life, and she tries to hook her up with that other girl. So she lies to Josh and says that Sam is dead and we found the remains of her body. I think they dressed like a mannequin or another dead person's body up like Sam. So he believed this until he found out the truth, because Wesley ratted everybody out, including himself, which causes Josh to kick out Angelica, Eli, and Wesley out the mall. So she goes to live with the Amazons and get accepted. Now, in the final episodes, Baron Triumph, for whatever reason, wants Angelica to finish constructing his nuke. And this is what I don't understand. She's good with chemicals and stuff because she's a drug dealer. But since when can she learn how to use a nuke? It's like the writers just kind of went a little too far in the let's make her like strong in empowerment type thing. And it's kind of like she was already that before, but now she knows how to like mess around with a nuke, but then she needs help. So she gets Miss Crumble's help. So since when can Miss Crumble learn how to deactivate a nuke? It's just too much of a reach, in my opinion. One element of Angelica that got dropped was in the first 2 episodes, they mentioned how she loves to set things on fire. She even has her own like makeshift like flamethrower. But then after like those 2 episodes, it gets completely abandoned and they don't bring it up no more. Josh, played by Colin Ford. So his character is very likable and everything. Like, you do gravitate towards him in the first 2 episodes. He's cool and everything. Got a skateboard. He skates around. He uses it as a shield. He has a samurai sword. You think he's gonna do the right thing, but the problem is he's the worst protagonist I've ever seen. He's only driven by one motive: to find Sam, the love of his life. He even has everything planned out. He finds her, they start living in other people's mansions in another state, and they live happily ever after. Like, he is so obsessed with her. It's to the point where, like, it gets on Angelica's nerves and a couple other people, because for whatever reason, everybody always makes him the leader of something, you know what I'm saying? And they want him to lead them. But instead of doing that, he just wants Sam, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, the fact that he's so whipped into just wanting to help this one person and nobody else, it really irritates me and everything. And because he watches a lot of zombie movies, he thinks once he gets bitten, he has to cut his hand off and ends up cutting his finger off. And so, like, eventually he sees video footage of Sam at, like, you know, what's his face's place? What I said the dude's name was Turbo and everything, which he knows now that Sam is alive and his friends lied to him. Now, he found the truth out after he banged that one girl. And it's kind of like, dude, he moved on. He has a new girlfriend, a girl who's actually into him and was willing to, like, sleep with him without all that confusion that Sam gave him, which I'll get into a little bit later. But then he completely dumps her for Sam again. And so, like, and I get why he kicked out, like, Wesley. Because Wesley tried to kill him. I guess I understand why he kicked out Eli, because Eli is always lying and blackmailing people, and also tried to set him up. Now, the whole Angelica thing was messed up. She just tried to get him to move on and stop being obsessed and everything, you know? But Josh, you know, he's not necessarily so squeaky clean himself, because the whole thing with Sam is completely messed up. So I'll get into the whole Sam backstory thing a little bit later, but needless to say that, like, after they, like, slept together and everything, or I think they did or not, I can't remember. At least they tried. And so he was supposed to hang out with his dad. No, he was supposed to call his dad. His mom left him a note, like she always does, and it kept saying, call dad. And his mom kept trying to call him, but he was too busy with Sam. So then when he finally got the message, his dad had died. Now, him and his mom, well, his dad and his mom are separated. Dad's in Canada, mom's in California. And he remembers always going, like, hunting with, like, his dad, and his dad always wanted to shoot elk, but there was never no elk. And the place that they was in, like, you know, the little tower place, is, like, I think over, like, 3 or 4 generations of, like, his family line and everything. And because he was unable to call his father, he blamed that on Sam and called her a slut. And it broke her heart, and it turns out he dumped her. So this whole time, we think he's this great guy who's going after his one true love, and completely broke her heart. And now he wants to find her in the apocalypse and live happily ever after. Like, what is this? Like a Disney, like, original animated movie? So he's just as scummy as, like, all the others and everything. And so he tries to, like, go and find her, but he wants Eli's, like, Baron Triumph outfit. So, because he has to go get her from Baron Triumph and everything. But Eli doesn't want to, he wants to come with. And I guess he just wants to bond with Josh or whatever, and also make amends and get back into his mall. But, you know, because Josh wanted that Baron Triumph outfit, and Eli was wearing it, that causes him to get stabbed and die. So he feels guilty about that, and then decided, you know what, I'm gonna stop like kicking people out and bring back Angelica and blah 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 and all this other crap. So he tries to rally all the other groups of like survivalists and everything to join him to fight like Baron and the football players, but they initially say no until they finally say yes after the explosion and everything. By that time, he had found Sam with and then like everything went boom. And so it's like, it's interesting too, because when it comes to the Josh character, he ended up killing like two people. Well, three if you count Eli, but that was a mistake. But then he killed the jock dude with the peanut oil, and he killed Baron with like when he killed the the golf player. It's kind of like, yeah, he's a jerk, but the dude deserved to die. And but then the whole Baron thing, I understand that, but he couldn't even fight his own bad guy. So Sam Dean, better known as Samara, and she is played by Sophie Simmet. And I think she's a foreign exchange student. She's British. This school has a lot of foreign exchange students. And so her and Josh, they bond like instantly, right? And she is your stereotypical perfect girl, you know what I'm saying? Like everybody loves her. She's so sweet, she's so nice. This is all a ruse, apparently. And the reason why she's depicted so nice and sweet and everybody loves her is because of Josh's doing. He manufactured all that crap. See, when those two started talking and she was being nice to him and she helped him with like the turbo bully situation and everything, because she felt bad he got his butt kicked and everything, he wanted her to be prom queen. So he had her go around like the mall or the school and start interacting with a bunch of the students and have her talk to them and be nice to them and try to like, hear them speak and like, what they like about like crap or what they don't like about crap and try to like encourage them. And they do this really cool montage thing of like this nice music, but you don't hear what they say. And it's like a really cool vignette. Like it works. It makes you believe she's the nicest, sweetest little thing. He uploaded it to like the school or the internet or something like that. Everybody in the school fell in love with her and like they want her to be prom queen and everything. But then, like, this is something fans should have listened to, but they overlook. He told her, "You're so nice" and everything. And she gets offended by that, but it's such a, like, quick little thing, you completely forget about it. Then she's missing for the rest of the series because she's just missing, and Josh is looking for her. And so when he finally finds her and everything, he's happy, she's happy, until we get to her solo episode, which is like the 8th episode. And my God, like she is difficult. So they decided to skip school for skip day. And so they go to his place, and he plans on banging her. And so it's a very complicated scene because it's like they just have this long conversation and you just start to really dislike her. So it's his first time and you can tell because like he tells her just like wait here and everything, and he goes to his room getting everything ready. Like the dude had this prepared. He bought satin sheets, and when he tries to do her, he's slipping around and he ends up smacking his face into hers. But that's not the complicated part. The complicated part is like they start talking about stuff, and he's all like, I love you and everything. And she's all like, don't say that. Like, you don't love me and everything. You don't know me. You have no idea who I really am and everything. And, they start to talk about like partners and everything. And she can tell it's his first time. But it's not her first time, which really breaks his heart because he was hoping that it would be their first time together. So he asked her a very important question, which all people should ask the other person if you want to clickety clack now. He asked her, how many dudes have you slept with? She gets pissed. And I mean pissed, talking about you got no right to ask me that question and blah, 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 blah. It's my body. And, if a guy sleeps with like 100 girls, he's a hero. But if a girl does it, she's like a slut. So then, he's like, well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to like offend you, but and then I'm thinking as I'm watching this, that's an important question to ask because you don't want to spread nothing, you know what I'm saying? And like you want to like make sure this person isn't banging and slanging 50 million 100 people and everything like that. Because I remember I had a friend in college, and ironically, she was British too. And so one day we're at the beach and we're just talking and everything, and she tells me she has an STD. My eyes bugged out. And my eyes bugged out, she got offended. And I didn't mean for my eyes to bug out, but I remember, this was the early 2000s. And like, I was an adult, and you just don't hear stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? You didn't hear about STDs growing up in like the 90s. You heard about AIDS in like the 80s, but that was about it. But you knew once you did hear the word STD, that was like a major scary thing. And so, like, she's all like, look, it's just one little bump on my fanny, because they call the butt the fanny and everything. And I'm thinking to myself in my head, one's enough, because you don't want to be spreading hogwarts around and getting people infected. You have to keep the risk, to a minimum and everything. This is why you have to tell people crap and stuff like that. And I remember I told my friend, he's like, what? No, like she slept with like one of my friends, my roommate, and everything. I'm like, huh. And so anyway, but yeah, asking somebody how many people you've been with is very, very important. And so she starts making up a bunch of numbers like 15, 20, blah, blah, blah. Like, does that offend you? Are you scared now? And trying to make him feel guilty and everything. But you're supposed to practice like safe intercourse and everything. So then she has a consent app. I think I remember this being around like the 2000s and stuff, but nobody really used it and everything. And so her consent app tells everything she does and everything she doesn't, and how many people she's been with. And so she has something to like look at and stuff. Then she just goes and orders like food and whatever, like Chinese food or something. Because Josh is your typical like white person who will not eat foreign food. And so she orders like Chinese or something. But when she answers the door, at this point in time, she's irritated with him, and she's dressing very sultry and puts on his mom's makeup in a very slutty kind of way. And Josh is like on like the couch, and he's in like his boxers, and she just opens the door to like the delivery dude, and Josh is trying to cover up, and she's trying to like embarrass him and everything. And the delivery dude's like, do y'all need help? And he's like, no, get out. But she's doing all this to piss Josh off because of the simple fact he asked how many people she's been with. Then at some point, after the whole situation with his dad, and he started calling her a slut and everything, he did that to hurt her feelings back. And plus, he was just acting like a typical angry male, which was completely wrong to call her that, because it's not her fault that his dad died and he didn't get to spend time with him, because like, he was with her and everything. And then he brings up some people on her consent app. And then she gets infuriated and is all like, you read how many people I slept with. He's like, well, you gave me the list and everything. And she was like, yeah, but you're supposed to read what I like to do and what I don't like to do, not how many people I've been with. I'm all like, why is she getting so angry about that and everything? Because of the simple fact he looked at how many people she'd been with and who, and it's just, she's so hip. Like, I don't know what the world her deal is. But then, of course, she disappeared. And when he finds her, And she has that little argument kind of thing with the one Asian girl that he slept with. She turns to Josh and she's pissed and she's all like, "You're a hypocrite." How is he a hypocrite? Like, he thought she was dead, you know what I'm saying? And so he decided to move on. How is that a hypocrite and everything? I don't get her. But then this is the weirdest thing that happens, other than her fighting Baron Zemo like Xena and everything. So her first big mistake was that whole solo episode where she wanted to like sleep with Josh and everything. Her second big mistake is putting the principal back in power. Her third big mistake was the most shocking twist of them all. Now that like Baron has been defeated, the nuke has been disarmed and everything, and the bad guys are the jocks are now like, friends with everybody else, and all the communities have come together. She decided, you know what, Josh, 'cause he tells her, like, I love you, but she's still like, yeah, no, don't say that. In fact, I want more than just like your love. I'm paraphrasing here. She wants more than just his love and to go to a different state and live in a mansion and everything. She wants it all. And she decided, you know what? Why don't I just be more than just prom queen? Why don't I just be queen of like, the world or whatever? And she sits in like a throne type chair. And she's sitting in Turbo's chair, taking over. And the question is like, why? And she tells Joss plain and simple, this is all your fault. You made all these students like me to make me prom queen with that video you made to make everybody like me and everything. I might as well like take advantage of that and live it up. So then some of the people start bowing down to her and everything. It was a twist I did not see coming, but at that same time, it doesn't really fit who her character kinda is. She's hypocritical, yes. She's narcissistic, yes. But I didn't really think she'll want to take over like everything, you know what I'm saying? And it just ends like that. So yeah, this show got a couple of flaws in it. It's very loosely based off of the comic. It is not perfect, but you will have a blast watching this show on Netflix. It is one of the most hilarious shows I've ever watched in a very long time. And it's really is a shame it got canceled after just one season. But yeah, it's still on Netflix and everything. I wish it was on DVD because I would like to own it and everything. Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.